Opening day starters are dropping left and right. We got you covered with all the latest news here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are brought to you by Fantrax. I'm Clay Link of RotoWire here with Erik Halterman today, stepping in for Todd Zola. Appreciate you lending your time on this Friday, Erik, and good to talk some baseball with you. And we got, as I said, a ton to cover, so let's just dive right into it. Unfortunately for Brewers fans and those who have drafted Devin Williams, big news the other day that Williams out 3 months, 2 stress fractures in his back, Erik. Bad news. So this is going to be an extended absence for Devin Williams. A lot of people assuming Joel Payamps is the new closer there in Milwaukee. What do you think? Is he the guy worth paying for, and are you going to get aggressive on Joel Payamps in your drafts to come?
Yeah, certainly not going to get aggressive on any of these Brewers relievers anytime soon, I wouldn't think. I think Joel Payamps, Trevor McGill, Abner Uribe, they're all worth watching, and I think all of them are worth picking up, in the reserve rounds or for $1 at the end of an auction, that sort of thing. I'm not sure any of them is rising to the point where I want to draft them, in that tier of pitchers who are either maybe the worst closers who actually have the job, like the Carlos Estevez's, or the tier that goes right after, the best guys who might get the job. I'm not even sure any of them are there yet until we start seeing some quotes from the team saying, yeah, this is the way we're leaning. Payamps, I guess with his 3 saves last year, is the one that will go first of this group. And his numbers are fine, but his numbers were really only fine last year. It was really quite unremarkable, especially in terms of strikeouts before last season. And both McGill and Uribe have more exciting strikeout stuff. So if it's a case where somebody else wants to take Payamps in the 20th round, where you're still picking actual players, and I can get Uribe or McGill in the 26th, something like that, I'd much rather just get the last one there. I think it's going to take some time to sort out the situation, and I think it may not even be that exciting of a prize at the end. It's half a season worth of saves for a team that's, might win 78 games or something.
Yeah, and I think you're going to have to pay a lot more than that for Payamps. I think I saw he went in the 12th round after the Williams news, so it's going to be
rich.
That's the scramble for closers. And I mean, I assume it's Payamps just because of his experience edge over Abner Uribe. But as you said, Uribe's got really exciting stuff. And, Payamps has a great slider too. And the fastball had great results last year. But just a lot of uncertainty, maybe a little too much for me to dabble here. Although I did get both of those guys in the reserve rounds. Well, Payamps and Uribe in the FSGA Champions draft on Monday. So I also drafted Garrett Cole there and Kevin Gausman. But I think
you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, exactly. I came out ahead on the Payamps Uribe thing. Still down overall, but we'll talk a little bit more about our FSGA drafts. You did one too this week, right?
Yeah, I did the FSGA Best Ball League. I'm not a best ball expert, but I had some fun with it. We can get into that later. You were in the Champions League. Does that mean you played against Real Madrid, Barcelona, Bayern Munich? How's that work?
Oh, a lot of heavy hitters, and there's actually relegation. 2 teams get relegated to a lesser league after the season. So, having Cole and Gausman, I'm already a little nervous, but I can't be letting RotoWire down and get us relegated. The other big news from recent days, Erik, Dylan Cease of the Padres. This helps him big time, I think, in terms of fantasy value. And the Padres are interesting. They traded Soto, but they're still very much pushing their chips in here. You got Dylan Cease, and now it looks like Jackson Merrill. They're going to kind of just press play on him and kind of end the development and finish the development, I guess, at the big league level, because it looks like Jackson Merrill will be with the team. So this team's kind of fascinating. They seem to be abandoning the traditional prospect development path here with some of their guys. And Yeah, I'm kind of excited about Merrill, even though has zero experience above AA.
Yeah, it's kind of thing you like to see, and I like to see the Padres, still making moves as if they think they're going to be pretty good. Of course, they aren't going to be as good as they were supposed to be the last few years, but even if you lost some of that talent, what was left was still a decent amount of talent. I mean, they were projected for low 80s wins to be right in the mix, I think, by most of the places. And that is exactly the spot on the win curve where you really should be adding players because, going from 82 to 84 projected wins does a whole lot more for your playoff odds than, say, going from 92 to 94 because you're probably already in that case. I like the Merrill news. I like to see a young guy with an elite contact skill. I think that's a really good building block. I'm nervous that he might not add much else. But hey, if he's got that one skill and he's got playing time and he's got youth, I at least want to take a chance as long as the price stays cheap. But on Cease, I'm curious because you said that this should be a big boost. I don't know
Well,
exactly what you used, but part of the problem
well,
with
I
Cease wasn't the part; it was his walk rate, and that still exists.
that's good. I mean, team context generally. I mean, the White
Yeah,
Sox are such a dumpster fire this year, so
that's
that
very true.
was more, that was more what I was leaning at. But yeah, the walks are still there, and then that is still going to be something that he'll have to work around and probably be walking a fine line, if he's handing out free passes like that. But yeah, just for team context, it's getting out of the South side. I think is big for Dylan Cease because it was probably just going to be a lost year there on most accounts.
Yeah,
But
I
yeah, I
guess
got.
just real quick,
No, go
the one
ahead.
way it might be a negative though that the move is you were going to use Dylan Cease in every divisional game in Chicago. I think even away in Minnesota, I'm pretty sure you were going to use him in every single divisional game. Are you going to use Dylan Cease at LA? Are you going to use him at Coors? You might actually not want. I mean, he's going early enough that if you like Dylan Cease enough to draft him, I guess maybe you are. You like him enough that you are going to use him in those games. But hey, if your thought on Dylan Cease was, I like him, but I'm going to avoid him against the toughest situations, he's got a few more of those now.
I hear you. Yeah, I mean, he may be a guy that you don't feel great about starting every week, but I think generally he's going to have more chances at wins and just better bullpen to
That's
preserve
all true for sure.
preserve his wins. Garrett Cole, oh man, this is a bummer, but actually we got some good news in the last 12 hours or so that Dr. Neil Elatrash looked him over and agreed that he does not need Tommy John surgery. So Cole's going to be down for a couple months at least, but avoided the worst case scenario here. And I mean, if you have an IL spot in your league, yeah, you can still draft Cole, but NFBC where you got no IL spots. Is he even like on your list anymore, Garrett Cole?
Yeah, I like to say I'm not someone who literally takes players off my draft board, but I certainly would move Cole far enough down that it's going to be very hard for me to get him. I just don't want to shrink my bench by a whole spot, knowing that I'm going to have other injured pitchers. Just check on your bench on like May 16th this year. Look at how many spots you actually have to play with, and then remember that next spring when it comes time to draft guys who are kind of injured right now, it fills up so fast. So I really would just be happy to let him be someone else's problem because you'd be banking on A, there being no setbacks, and B, him still being Garrett Cole when he comes back. If you invested a pick in him, you're still, somebody who's going to take a chance on him is still doing so not that late, maybe, around 10 to 12 or something is where you might see him going. And if you're taking a guy that early, you're not seeing for a couple months, and even in the best case scenario, right, you're relying on him coming back from a serious elbow issue. And you said that this was good news that he avoided surgery, but it's just we're going to hope that rest and recovery heals it. It's not a situation where, oh yeah, he's actually fine, he won't need surgery. No, he's quite hurt. It's just we're going to see if we can do this rest and recovery thing. And there's so many examples of that not working. So if I'm going to take Garrett Cole anywhere in a place where I don't have an injured list spot to hide him in, it better be really, I think, quite late.
I took him in that FSGA draft I alluded to earlier, and that was in the 5th round before we knew at the time. That was Monday night, so all that we knew was that he was headed for the MRI. We didn't really know anything else. Wish I could have that one back, but initially that's where I had slotted him, so I stuck by it. In future drafts, I probably just will not be taking that chance. There's too many other good players, and time is money. So I want to do my best from the start and make do. And I want to leave Garrett Cole in my drafts to come to somebody else. Tommy Edman, Erik, he's going to open the season on the IL with that wrist injury. Victor Scott is on the rise. People seem pretty excited about Victor Scott. Our staff keeper league, stake league, he goes for several dollars in the auction. Still doesn't have anything locked up, but you get a sense that Victor Scott is trending toward the roster. Is it uncertain? What do you think?
Yeah, I want to make sure that we don't go too far because Victor Scott is such the kind of player that fantasy players really want to make the team because he's got so much speed. We're not just talking he's fast in the minors. He stole 94 bases. So if you want, the next Eury Ruiz type, somebody who I'm not sure if their bat's good enough to keep him in the lineup, but if they're in the lineup, they're going to steal all of the bases. I mean, it makes sense. There's so much potential here for fantasy purposes. And unlike Eury Ruiz, Victor Scott's legs actually lead to good defense in the outfield. So there's some real world value there too. Just want to make sure we don't get too far ahead of ourselves because he only played he played 66 games at the AA level, none at AAA. He's not that young though. He is 23. So it's not as if this would be rushing him too fast. So I think I can get behind the hype train. I just wouldn't want to spend too much. I don't think I was in on him in either of those auctions, that you were talking about the other day, the stake league or the staff keeper league, because he got to the point where he was going as much as players who definitely are going to be here and are definitely going to do something. I really like Scott very late in a draft where, hey, if it turns out he doesn't make the team, you drop him, but there's always going to be someone you want to pick up in that first fab period. Well, the guy you're going to drop now, right? And he's an ideal candidate for that spot. I think in every draft, I want to leave with one or two guys who have high upside and their downside is so low that they're just going to be off the team on opening day. I think he's the perfect guy in that tier.
Yeah, I was hoping to get Scott for a buck or two, but as he got pushed up, I just got priced out. And still just don't know if he's going to even have a role. So we'll just have to wait and see. Another guy like Jackson Merrill, who hasn't played above AA in games that count. Prospect who has a little bit more pedigree and hype, Wyatt Langford, homered again yesterday. I think that's 5 spring training homers for Langford. He appears headed for the opening day roster. So, he's been batting like 3rd for them. Maybe that's to get him more looks, but his limited experience in the minors, I thought would push him down. But they seem inclined, the Rangers, to maybe start Langford on the big league roster.
Yeah, maybe this is a case where they're viewing all his high-level college experience in the SEC as just, why would he need years and years in the minors? He's faced quality pitching, even though he's only had, 40 to 50 games as a professional. He's played games that were the equivalent of the low minors, so we think he's ready. And again, he's not actually super young because of that college experience. He's 22 years old. He's older than Jackson Chourio, more developed, I think, more MLB ready, despite not having nearly as much experience in the minors. So I think everything is pointing towards him being on the team. It would be nice to see something closer to, confirmation from the Rangers. I'm trying to remember at what point last couple winters were we hearing officially like, hey, Julio Rodriguez, he's on the team. Bobby Witt, he's on the team. I kind of would have thought that we would have heard by now, but I don't think I'm yet reading anything negative into that. I would expect that we see confirmation within 3-4 days, probably.
Yeah, I could see that. Sorry, I was being sure we didn't miss any big news here on our outline, but we'll just keep rolling because we got a lot here. Adam Duvall back to Atlanta. just wanted to mention that mostly because, well, Duvall has a home, but, Kelnick's struggling, and they're saying he's going to platoon with Kelnick, but really kind of puts Kelnick on notice that, playing time's not as safe as some may have thought, and he's really going to have to perform, or else he could lose out on even more playing time.
Yeah, I think this is a negative for Kelenic, not just because, hey, now there's somebody there who is going to take the at-bats against lefties. It's also negative because it's just an insight into how Atlanta is viewing Kelenic. I think there was some thought that, okay, they see something here. They think with a fresh start, he's going to break out and be that everyday player. He's only 24 years old, so it would be not a shock at all if it just took a few years for a very talented player and he eventually figured things out in his age 24, age 25 season. That's a perfectly ordinary career path. And so if you wanted to be in on Jared Kelenic for that reason in the early offseason after you got the trade, I think that made sense. I don't think I would be as in on him now because it seems like Atlanta may have soured on him a little bit, or at least they're revealing that, the things they were saying early in the offseason might have been a little bit more hype and less of
because
an
they were
actual
saying
plan.
Oh, we don't intend to platoon him. Well,
Right.
They changed tune in a hurry there, so yeah, that's kind of dings his outlook a little bit. Taj Bradley was diagnosed, Eric, with a pectoral strain. He was happy that it wasn't an arm or a shoulder, but he's going to be shut down for at least 2 weeks. He's going to be on the IL to start the season. I saw one of the guys listed, Jacob Lopez. He was among those listed as a possible replacement in the rotation, but he was optioned today, so maybe Jacob Wegas back. I know they're stretching out Chris Davinsky and Tyler Alexander as well, so who knows? But the Rays are an arms factory, and one of these guys will probably end up being good. And I actually saw Naoyuki Uwasawa had a pretty good outing today. He had really struggled in spring training. He's in that list too. I don't think any of these guys are like must-adds in a mixed league, but guys to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable not going in on any of them in draft season. Maybe if I was in a deep AL only league, I'd probably be taking a dart or two. But the Rays always have a spot or two at the back of their rotation that is not filled by a true starter. And I think that's what's going to be going on here. The problem is now they're, one injury away from needing to do that in at least 2 spots. And they're 2 injuries away from needing to do it in 3 spots. And they don't exactly have a durable rotation. So there's a chance that if this injury for Bradley becomes fairly serious and knocks him out for longer. Right now, he's shut down completely from throwing for 2 weeks, but there's a chance that this is the start of something that really spirals out of control because it's going to be a little bit until they get some of those other arms back from injury.
Uncle Ted in the chat mentioned Ryan Pepio. I'm kind of excited about him. And Zach Littell had a real nice outing, spring outing. So, it doesn't mean much, but, maybe there's a little bit of upside there with Littell. So I think I picked him up in stake. He's just a late guy that I think could be worthwhile in certain leagues.
And the fact that the Rays now will need those guys a bit more. I think that benefits Pepio and Littell because, again, they're not going to mix and match at every spot. They're going to need more guys to go from that 3-4 inning guy to an actual 5 inning guy at this point.
Good point. Cody Sanga apparently has had some sort of setback because his shutdown period was extended. Man, if you drafted him already, maybe you cut him in this first fab period. Do you think about cutting bait? Are you stubborn? What kind of if you had to put yourself in the shoes of a Cody Sanga manager right now, how do you think you would play this, having Cody Sanga on a roster?
Yeah, hopefully we'll get a little bit more by the time you have to make that cut decision, but I certainly wouldn't be drafting him. And I think my rule with looking at injured pitchers this time of year is if they're throwing, then okay, I'd be interested in taking a shot. For example, Kyle Bradish, pretty serious injury potentially. There was a real sprain in his elbow, but he's going through his throwing program. He's actually up to throwing bullpen sessions. So I know that he's going to miss time, but what he's physically doing right now is actual baseball things, whereas what Kodai Senga is doing is not. He's just sitting around waiting for his arm to heal. So if I were taking a shot at a starting pitcher who'd fallen quite a bit, whether it's Bradish, whether it's Garrett Cole, or whether it's Kodai Senga, it would not be the Sengas and the Coles who are not doing anything but waiting right now, because we don't even know, we're not going to really get news until their shutdown periods end and they start working again. So it's just really hard to be optimistic at all when a guy isn't picking up a ball. If we had seen Kodai Senga even start throwing at all, the picture's very different.
Yeah, I know it's tough in a league if you've already drafted him to make that cut, especially when you drafted him, with a premium pick. But, you got to know when to cut your losses. And that guy that you pick up for Senga could end up being a pretty important piece on your team. So I probably would flip that piece and, churn that roster spot, because this setback, who's to say there aren't more setbacks? Who knows when he comes back? So, by the way, we had another guy in the chat, Matt Holmes, mentioned Jackson Holiday. We talk about Victor Scott, Wyatt Langford. What about Jackson Holiday? Looking like he could be the starting second baseman for the Baltimore Orioles. Fascinating team. They seem to have a factory of these like baby-faced white kids, who all look the same, with that like long blonde hair, it's strawberry blonde hair. They're churning them out, but Holiday is like a tippy top prospect, and I guess the question in the chat was where are we drafting him? He seemed to be going pretty high in that stake league. I bowed out eventually.
Yeah, and he's, as with all these rookies, sometimes they just catch the hype in your room and they go so high that it's not interesting. I think the main thing to keep in mind with any of these rookies, whether it's Wyatt Langford, Jackson Holiday, or Jackson Churio, or some other guys lower down, is you want to be taking them at a point in the draft where they could still outdo their draft price, right? So if you were taking Wyatt Langford in pick 110 and you're saying, well, I look at the guys 50 spots ahead of him, and if he has his best case season, he'll hit like them. Cool. Take him at 110 then. Don't take him at 60, because he needs to max out to be worth his draft price. Jackson Holiday is coming later. As long as he stays fairly late, I think he's a great upside play. By fairly late, I just mean, well into the 100s, maybe closer to 200. I don't know exactly where he's been lately. He's going to be creeping up each week as we get closer to opening day. But as long as there's still enough room for profit, I'm interested. The thing with Holiday, though, is I'm not sure how much of an immediate fantasy impact is going to be there. The projections are all pretty muted, just in terms of, things like power and speed. Calling him more of a, Zips for a full season gives him 11 homers and 12 steals. Now, I know projections are always low on rookies, but they're notably middling on Holiday in those areas. And that's the only thing that gives me pause, because I know he's a very talented player in real life, and he's going to be quite useful in fantasy. I just wonder, if you're going to start pushing him up the draft board, that's because you think in some worlds he really goes off. And I just don't know how likely he is to really go off quite yet.
Blue Jays got some tough news on multiple players today. Danny Jansen, a wrist fracture. He has battled so many wrist issues over the last couple of years. It's a bad trend for Danny Jansen. Opening day looking pretty much off the table for him. I got to think Alejandro Kirk jumps up maybe a couple rounds in light of this. I do like that Kirk, among backstops, he is one of the best hitting, pure hitting catchers. He is a bowling ball type guy, and he could pull a hammy at any point. But I think he would be a guy that I'd be certainly more inclined to take at this stage, just because he has a little runway to play, 66 to 75% of the games.
Yeah, it looks like nothing yet is suggesting that Danny Jansen's current injury is going to be that long of a problem. But if Kirk gets, some runway as a true starter early in the year and has a good first couple weeks, then that's how he settles into more than just a 50-50 split. It also always depends with Kirk what the Jays are doing with their DH spot. And now that Justin Turner is in town, and hey, also Joey Votto could be be over there as well. Danny Jansen's health status matters a ton for Alejandro Kirk, because I don't think Kirk's getting many DH at bats, even if he, does bounce back and looks more like he did in 2022. So I think definitely I'm with you that this is at least a small boost for Kirk, although I liked him already. So maybe this just means everybody else is boosting him up to where I was already taking him.
Something I'm doing this draft season that I never really did before is investing in two high-end catchers. I've been getting Will Smith and Francisco Alvarez in a lot of spots, and I'm not going to do that in every league, certainly, but the position has improved, but the dregs at the end are still pretty bad. So I want to avoid those. And I really like Will Smith, even with Ohtani there. You got to remember JD Martinez was there, so it's not like the UT spot was, or the DH spot was, free for Will Smith. It's not like he's going to lose a ton of playing time, but just a little bit. I think he's very much among the top at the position. And then Kevin Gausman, unlikely for opening day. It sounded like it's precautionary. They're saying, we'll take 30 starts over, pushing it for 32. But this is something that I think will lead to him dropping, kind of substantially, really, in drafts this weekend.
Yeah, and there's the key point here is if you're someone who just, plugs in the numbers in the projections and turns that into a ranking system, you might be tempted to say, all right, well, Kevin Gausman is going to make 30 starts instead of 32. I know how to do that. I just changed this one number, changed this 2 to a 0. All the numbers go down a little bit. Let's see where he falls. But I think you got to do more than that, because this isn't just a case of, well, he's going to miss a couple starts and then he's definitely going to be Kevin Gausman the rest of the way. This is a thing that happened, right? That's what we can't forget. Even if guys get over their injuries, the injury was still a thing that happened. So we're still talking about a guy who is, 33 now. So he's not in his late 30s, but certainly he's well enough into his 30s that the health can start going fast. It's not yet, but we're talking about a guy who's, 33 and has had a real shoulder thing that he's had to deal with already this year. Certainly there's a world in which he's completely normal from April 15th through October. But if this is the first of several seasons where Kevin Gausman, makes 25 starts and 22 and then 16 and then 21 again, I don't think that would surprise anybody. So given that age, given that, it really did happen, I'm not excited about Kevin Gausman at this point.
Then Eury Perez, not a projected opening day starter, but a opening weekend starter for the Marlins. He's looking unlikely for that first start of the year. Shut down from throwing for 3 to 4 days. A recurrence of a fingernail issue on his right hand. That's the kind of injury that, hockey guys are always like, oh, a baseball guy can't pitch through a fingernail issue. But actually, pitchers are meticulous about their fingernails. You know that? They're like,
right. I mean, you
have to.
You can't grip a ball.
Yeah,
you can't pitch.
It's kind of wild how important fingernails are to a pitcher. But yeah, this is it doesn't sound like a long shutdown period, but it's probably going to cost in the start of the year. Another guy that I think you just got to probably bump down a round or two. Although they already said with Perez that he was going to have an innings limit, so maybe this doesn't really affect his projection much.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I have missed out on Eury Perez completely so far because I like his talent as much as anyone else, but there's a lot of talented pitchers that debuted last year or the year before, particularly though last year we had that wave of guys, and all the other ones don't have the same innings concerns. So if you're going to take a chance on a young guy with the volatility, the high upside, the low floor that brings, that comes with every young guy, I would rather at the price take a chance on, one of the guys who at least should give me a chance, if all goes well, at a high innings workload. I think Eury Perez next year, I'm really going to want him on a lot of my teams. I had him on a bunch of teams last year and was happy about it. But I think that this might be more of a consolidation year where we get a bunch of these minor things where the Marlins, look for any excuse they can to just shut him down for a couple of weeks. I think it's going to be obnoxious to have Eury Perez on your team, even if the results might end up paying off his draft price.
Yeah, maybe you're like Ryan Weathers in that rotation. Maybe a Ryan Weathers resurgence. Like kind of coming back on
Having a good spring.
Trevor Rogers too. And we're gonna see what, because they're down Braxton Garrett too, right? So they're gonna be, and Edward Cabrera. Geez, they're gonna have to test that depth early. The Miami Marlins. All right, Ronald Acuna returned to game action. That's big. Obviously, he's in the clear to once again be the runaway number one. That price in auctions is very high. We haven't seen a player go for that much in a while. Usually goes for what, like 55 to 65. So if you're doing an auction this weekend, be prepared to at least bid him up to the 50s.
Yeah.
Corey Seager, optimism building for opening day. It's good for him. It's, we're getting a lot of injury setback news. It's always nice to get a bit of news about a guy being ahead of schedule. And Corey Seager.
Yeah. It makes me wish that I hadn't moved him down the draft board a month or so ago. There was, a 2 or 3 week period where you really could have gotten quite a decent little discount on Corey Seager.
Yeah. I mean, he's one of the best, hitters, and maybe not all around hitters, but in terms of, average, he's always up there near 300 and just a great player. So that's big news for the world champs. They are going to be down Nathaniel Lowe and I believe Josh Young too, right? Although Young could still make camp. He's expected to play in late exhibition games, so we'll see on Josh Young there. And then finally, the last bit of news I had was the Jackson Merrill thing. We did kind of already touch on that, but if he takes well and adjusts to big league pitching, he could go like 15-15, right?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. I think he could also go 3-3 and be back down, pretty early, but 15-15 with a decent batting average, I think, or maybe 10-20 with a good batting average is also possible. I think really his strength seems to be definitely contact over power, but there's enough there.
Well, we'll take a brief pause here, and I'll bring you a quick word from our sponsors. Then we will get back to fantasy baseball in a quick second. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who, yes, I did acquire in the RotoWire Stake League. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's fantrax.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. And also, we're happy to welcome on Rival. It's officially fantasy baseball season. It's time for MLB Best Ball on Rival Fantasy. That's right. Rival Fantasy now has Best Ball. Full season lobbies are live now until opening day with both fast and slow drafts. Then weekly and daily drafts will be available from opening day through the end of the World Series. Best Ball is all the fun of the draft without the season-long management. Enter a league, draft your squad, and the app does the rest. No need to set your lineup or make waiver moves. The highest scorers at the end of the regular season will be the winners. Invite your friends and start drafting for the 2024 fantasy baseball season. Sign up at joinrival.com/RotoWire for a $200 deposit match and $25 in free entries. Welcome to the future of fantasy sports. Welcome to Rival Fantasy. We appreciate their sponsorship, of course. Eric, earlier this week, you and I and a few others from RotoWire had a marathon back-to-back draft session. It was about I mean, goodness, was that like 10 hours, 12 hours?
10, I think. Yeah, to 2 to midnight was how I had it clocked at. It was a
I
new
messed
experience.
up. I messed up. No, that was really the only day that worked. So, yeah, we had to do the RotoWire Stake League and then the Staff Keeper League right afterwards. So it was not something I'd love to do again. Hopefully we can split those up.
Great
But it was,
practice for both of us this
yeah,
weekend, though.
exactly. It was
Yeah,
kind of like
tons
a
of
great,
hitting all day.
it was kind of like a great like test in a way. Like
Yeah.
eventually I just had to abandon, any cheat sheets I had and just, it was all just on the whim at the end. So
Yeah, I'm
it
gonna
was it
learn
was
who my
crazy.
final minor leaguers are, in a few weeks when I open up the team again. But
Yeah, I was just
it was
drafting
fun.
off James's prospect list at the end. Just this guy I've never heard of,
Yep.
but it was fun. It was taxing. It was a challenge. The inflation was crazy, and I threw out Wyatt Langford in the Staff Keeper League early because he was available. The inflation was crazy. He went for I think 41. So it was a pretty insane sort of just mad scramble to spend cash. People just had so much cash that they were just going +1 until they got the guy. It didn't matter. So where are you in the Staff Keeper League? Are you in the rebuild? Are you trying to win now? And what did you do with your budget here in the Staff Keeper League?
Yeah, I think I'm basically where I always am in every keeper league every year, which is competing but not quite a favorite. I feel like I finished like 3rd through 6th of every season of every dynasty league I've ever been in. I've never managed to pull off a rebuild and build this amazing core that's going to take me to an actual championship, but I'm always there. I think may have finished about 6th last year, but I was in that final group. I think, were you part of that as well in this league?
Yeah, that
We
was a
were in
nice
that
season by
mix,
you.
right?
Yeah, there
Yeah,
were
I
like
think
6 teams that were right there.
yeah, and that's my traditional place, is to be at the back of that group. So I think that's basically where I was, and that meant that I entered auction night with the second lowest amount of money. I think I had like $73 left, and with the inflation, as you mentioned, I had about $73, and the most expensive guys were going over 60.
Yeah,
So I was just completely out on the first and second tier. I maybe made a strategic mistake when I just decided that, heading into the auction, all right, I'm not going to go much beyond 20 for my most expensive hitter and pitcher left. I should be able to get somebody kind of interesting after that first tier really goes off the board. I don't know, man. Sean Murphy for 24 and Carlos Rodon for 20. I'm certainly not excited about that second one. But at that point, there was nobody that I could even fathom being worth $20, and Carlos Rodon maybe. But I don't know. If you were in my position where you have so little money, but a pretty good core, right? This was a team that, again, finished 6th, and most of the guys are returning. Would you have said, all right, I need to get 2 $20 to $25 players, then fill out the rest with small guys? Or would you have said, I'm going to go for one $40+ player and everybody else is single digits?
that's a good question because as much as I'd like to kind of spread it around, there's always a point in this draft where I start panicking about leaving money on the table. It's just
Right.
You have to spend it, and every price seems absurd. Like if you just base simply on your values, you're going to be sitting there shaking your head. You got to overspend somewhere in a draft like this. So as much as I'd like to said I would have been, calculated and really picked my spots, I probably would have splurged on somebody. It looks like you kind of splurged on Rodon, and that's about it. I mean, you did not push your remaining budget all in on just a couple players. You spread it around. First guy I got was Teoscar Hernandez at 41. That was early, and I wanted Teoscar. Alex Bregman at 32, Willie Adames at 26, Jamer Candelario at 20. I was happy with some of the $1 guys at the end, like 2023 All-Star Orlando Arcia,
Yeah.
Jock Peterson. I got Frankie Montas. Lance Lynn, Trevor Rogers. So it was
I
certainly interesting.
don't like your $2 Montas and your $4 or sorry, your $4 Montas, your $2 Trevor Rogers. I don't like those guys a whole lot less than my $20 Carlos Rodon. So I think if I had just said, all right, I plan to get a $20 pitcher, the only guy left I don't like, let's just put that money elsewhere and fight with Clay for the interesting $2 to $4 pitchers. I really like what you did there, especially with Arcia too. I think the secret to winning a deep auction, whether it's a keeper league that's 18 teams like this, or if it's a only league, is if you're the guy who leaves with the most $1 and $2 players who are very boring but have legitimate everyday starting jobs. If you can get a few of those, man, you're in really good shape, because it's just hard to get enough playing time. $1 Arcia with 600 plate appearances he could get, even if he's so boring in them, that's huge.
Yeah, he seems to be in the clear. He's got that spot to himself. No more like Vaughn Grissom people speculating he might take that job. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back too hard. I've never won the league, so I'm still trying to. Ryan Roof had like a reign of terror in that league, and Erickson's won several league titles. So it's time to get one for myself and a stake league. You, by the way, I want to give you credit, because last year in the stake league, I've never won the stake league. I have eaten the vast majority of the years, but I've never won it. You won it by the widest margin in history, like 149 roto points. Congrats on the great year once again, Eric.
Yeah, 149 out of 160. It wasn't quite a 15-team league where I would have gotten 149 out of 150.
True,
that would have been so. That's the goal for this year, I guess. I got to get 159. Yeah, it was the best team I'll ever have. I don't know exactly how I did it. I wish I did. I would tell everybody, because I think that team was the answer key. But sometimes it just falls into place. Had my like $1 or $2 Justin Steele, a couple of guys like that at the end. Sometimes it really works. So gotta find a way to repeat this year.
Yeah, that was an impressive showing, certainly. Well, we talked earlier about FSGA, and we were both lucky enough to participate in some of their drafts this week. I was drafting 11th. Strider actually went 10th, so I was like sitting there like, wow, am I going to get Strider? I was thinking about Trey Turner. I went with Juan Soto, followed him up with Riley, and then Gausman, Gallen, Cole, Will Smith. So already from the start, there's some issues here. No speed and 2 injured starters. Speed's going to be an issue, but actually in staff keeper, Jeff Erickson kind of showed that in a standalone league, man, you can punt stolen bases. He did that in keeper league last year and won it. So I think in this age where there's more stolen bases, you need more of them to compete. It's harder to compete. A lot of guys are going to be chipping away, adding 20 steal guys here and there, and still finish bottom half of the category. So, in the end, I decided to just try to outslug everybody, and I am going to need Gausman or Cole to be healthy for most of the season. But I got Bryce Miller, who I mentioned on this podcast a few weeks ago, as a foundational, must draft type of guy. I got JD Martinez in the 20th round. Some rumors about maybe JD going to the Mets, but what do you think? Is he a guy that you're looking to draft on the cheap before he signs?
Yeah, or I should say yes. I haven't managed to do it, but I always see someone else getting JD Martinez for very cheap and thinking, man, I forgot about JD Martinez. Should have gone for that. I think that he still does have enough bat that I would definitely like him late in drafts. And because he's UT only, sometimes people just completely ignore him. This league, it's not a overall contest. Obviously, that's partly why you can punt speed. Is it also? It's a trading league, is it?
Yeah. So I drafted Victor Scott, and since he's my only speed guy, I'm probably just gonna have to trade him.
Yeah, that's a good shout.
Especially if he makes the team. There's a bunch of hype. That might be maybe the time to get him. In your draft, you said it was best ball. How did you tackle that draft, Eric?
Yeah, so I'm no best ball fanatic, so you should take everything I say here with at least a little grain of salt. But I'm pretty sure that best ball is kind of two different games depending on the roster size. If you're in one of those where the bench is, bigger or sometimes even well bigger than the starting lineup, then you can take a lot of chances. You're never really going to have to worry about having to take a zero at any position, as long as you're not too crazy, as long as you have some amount of responsibility and are smart enough about your positional requirements and all that. You're going to have somebody everywhere, and so you can take some chances, try to have some fun, go with guys who are super swingy. That often people talk about best ball guys. They're thinking guys who will have really strong weeks and then do nothing for several weeks because, hey, you spike that one good week in a best ball. That's huge. This is not one of those. This was only 26 rounds. And the bench was like 8 or something. I forget exactly how much. Maybe was it 16 man? I think, 16 man lineup, 10 man bench, something like that. Point is, there's not a lot of players on your roster, and the fear of taking a zero is definitely there. So a lot of my late picks are just informed by position eligibility. I set out the goal of getting 6 commas. So either six players who have a comma in their positional eligibility, or somebody like Luis Rengifo might have 3 commas or something like that. I wanted 6 total commas. I think I only ended up with 4, which meant I had 1 fewer middle infielder and 1 fewer outfielder than I really wanted. But there's a reason why I was targeting guys like Jake Cronenworth and DJ LeMahieu. This is also the scoring system penalizes strikeouts. So guys with multiple eligibility who don't whiff and are just going to be in the lineup being really boring, their week-to-week production might be really steady and kind of low, which is counterintuitive for a best ball. But with the rosters that are so small, I was almost thinking about this more like one of those gladiator leagues where, you really just better make sure you're going to still have a lineup for as much of the season as you can. And it's as much about avoiding those zeros. So that was really informing, I think, a good deal of my draft.
Yeah, I got pretty into the underdog best ball last year. Fun game, but it really is a totally different game. At least in that format for best ball, there's no closers, there's no catchers. Catchers get lumped in at other infield positions. So it really your research and experience drafting in a roto league it doesn't really carry over to a best ball, but it's still is mostly about knowing the player pool, but it's also about like you said, getting multi-positional guys and just kind of building a roster that has some flexibility and some upside too. A multi-positional eligibility guy that I'm kind of coming around on is Ahmed Rosario of Tampa Bay. Went to Driveline, he went to Driveline trademark, but I always thought he could hit with Cleveland and with the Mets before that. And there may still be something here. He doesn't really seem to have a set spot, but I think he's sneaky in the end game. And I was thinking about bidding him up in the stake league. I think James got him, and I was kind of lamenting that I did not go +1 on Ahmed Rosario.
Yeah, for a guy who did basically nothing last year, I think he really is quite interesting. I mean, 6 homers, 15 steals, 263 last year. That's certainly in the realm of possibility from this year, but he's got so many of those small little factors that make him interesting late. He went to Driveline, as you said. He's on the Rays. They're a team that knows how to improve its players. He's not actually that old. He's only 28 years old, despite feeling like he's on the downswing of his career already. And also, he was, considered an elite talent when he came up. Now, obviously, I don't think we should still consider him to be the 3rd best player in his debuting class. He was the number 3 prospect, at least at Fantrax, back in 2017 prior to his debut. I don't think he's going to end up being the 3rd best guy on that list by the end of his career. But that talent, that all-around talent is, maybe was overestimated, but certainly there's plenty of it there. And so if the Rays can get a guy who can do a lot of things, and they can get him to do 1 or 2 things enough better where he's going in drafts, I think it makes a ton of sense.
Tyler McGill is a riser. He went in the 23rd round of the FSGA Champions League draft, and that was about the highest I'd seen in a minute. But he's having a good spring, and kind of reminded people, that there was once some hype around Tyler McGill. Not to be confused, by the way, with Trevor McGill, who we mentioned earlier as a Brewers closer candidate. Tyler McGill of the Mets. Do you have other specs that you like, or maybe do you think you might throw a dart at Tyler McGill?
I like the Tyler McGill idea, especially because he serves as a good reminder that if you want to look for good sleepers, find articles from 2 years ago, because he would have been all over there. He really did stink last year in a lot of different ways. He just got worse across the board. His ERA actually improved, but his ERA estimators got well over a run and a half worse. Bad strikeout rate, bad walk rate. It was a bad season for McGill, and I had him a lot of places because I really liked his underlying numbers in his first 2 partial seasons. And because I was so burned last year, I missed out on him so far this season. But all the things that made him interesting heading into last year, those still exist. And if he's showing more this spring and has a path to playing time, I really like him as a late dart there. Is he still going quite late? How late did you say you went in that FSGA draft?
23rd round. So one of the first, an early reserve pick. I kind of like it as a spec. But, the Mets are already down.
Late enough.
Yeah. Mets obviously, going to need arms, and Scherzer's not going to be. Or I'm sorry, Scherzer obviously gone from New York. Senga is not going to be back for a while. David Peterson out, so they're going to be tested here. And who's to say McGill can't leap Adrian Hauser at some point on the depth chart? So I'm interested there. I kind of like Jared Jones as a starting pitcher.
I noticed you've been taking him a few times in the reserve round of the Staff Keeper League, which we were just talking about. In the first round, I was deciding between Jared Jones and Hurston Waldrop, who were the top 2 players remaining on James's prospect rankings. The last update of which may have been before the news that Jones was, pushing towards the spot. And so I took Waldrop because he was rated higher, and I think he's got a shot of showing up, at some point this season. Certainly in a redraft league, I'd be on Jones, but you went Jones right after, and I was really thinking, man, I'm regretting this pick. So I think there's a lot of potential there, and it could show up right away.
We'll see, but Jones went in the 21st round of the FSGA draft, so he's certainly a guy that people are starting to come around on. Louis Varland too is who's starting to get some love in the late rounds, and I didn't get him in FSGA, but I got him in TGFBI. Sean Manaea was looking all right. He could at least be a decent streamer for you. All right. Well, I didn't mention it earlier, but you and I are both in New York City. I'm literally right on Times Square here at Hotel Edison. You are down the street at the Iroquois Hotel?
Yep. Somehow I ended up at the other hotel, even though my draft's going to be at the Edison. I just booked a little bit late. But, hey, I got a nice little morning walk. Oh, really? You want to swap
mine's
rooms?
At the Iroquois. Not really. But no, it is kind of strange. I will be running the board for the AL tomorrow, but it is just great to be here. It's always surreal to be in the big city, and it should be fun. And the Tout Wars League I do is the head-to-head, which it's not as dramatic as going from Roto to like best ball, like underdog best ball, but it is a wildly different game than I'm used to playing, and it's also a 12-teamer. So I think I was telling Greg Jewett on the show a few weeks ago, I think I'm going to go back to my stars and scrubs, because trying to spread it around last year, trying to be Ariel Cohen, that's not me. I'm not Ariel Cohen.
And in a 12 that incentivizes, right? In a 12 that really does push you more towards stars and scrubs, because the scrubs are actually good.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I felt the guys that I would gotten at $1 in prior years were on the same level as the guys that I was, spending $4 to $5 on the year before.
Right.
And I also think in a 12, it's so important to get, and it's head to head too with a playoff system. So, there's going to be so much attrition through the year. I think it's, you get some really good core players, and then you add to it throughout the year and just hope you get your team running at peak level for the postseason. So I think it's time to go back to my roots in the 12 and go stars and scrubs. You taking any new strategies into Tout Wars this year?
Yeah, the main thing I wanted to do last year was my first year in Tout Wars. I'm in the Tout Wars NL League, and the Tout Wars NL in particular is full of long-time Tout Wars NL players, not just long-time Tout Wars players. So it's really just established the bidding rules, the bidding norms, where closers tend to go, where catchers tend to go, all of that. You can look back through the years because it's the same people in the league for 5-10 years in most cases. I think last year there were only 3 of us who'd been in the league for less than a decade, and one of them was Ian Kahn, and he'd won it twice. So there was just 2 of us rookies. We got one more rookie, I believe Brendan Tuma, this year. But because I'm in a league with so many people who've done exactly this league so much more than me, I don't think I'm in a position to outwit everybody. I think that they know how to do well in Tout Wars NL specifically. So my game plan has been, let's draft a team that looks like a Tout Wars NL team. Let's not try to be the one that everybody's talking about after, like with Doug Dennis's teams where he punts starting pitching and he wins. I think he can do that. I don't think I can do that. I think that it's a viable strategy for someone, but because I don't think I'm the guy who's going to pull that off, I'm really just trying to look at what do the successful teams in this league look like? What are the ratios between, the amount of money they spend on hitting and pitching? How do they spread out within their hitters, within their pitchers? And I'm going to go in with a set of dollar values that look like successful teams in the past and try to stick more or less close to that. I think that ends up not particularly stars and scrubsy because this is a 12-team NL only league. The incentives are very different than a 12-team mixed league.
I think it's,
but my main goal is to look like it's supposed to look, basically.
Yeah, I love that strategy for a 12-team mix, but then if you try to take that into an AL only 12-team, you really don't have a great chance, I would say. So the deeper the league, the more you got to be conscious with your budget and spread it around, I'd say. How much do you think Wyatt Langford goes for in that AL tomorrow?
Well, yeah, I'll be in the NL, so I don't have to worry
about
it. But he should go for he'll be one of the.
Yeah, I'll be running the board for AL, so I'm thinking about
25, 30. I mean, how far is he going to go?
Oh man, I'd say he goes like 20, but probably not a ton more.
Because these leagues tend to be more conservative. Is that the right word? I'm also curious to see what that means for the Ronald Acuna situation in the NL only league. With these experts, industry leagues, whatever you want to call them, tend to be made up with people who, it's far from universal, but they skew a little bit more towards, I really don't want to screw up with my expensive buys. So is this going to be a league where Acuna does shoot up to $12 more than everyone else or not? I don't think it's going to be me who gets him if he does, but I'm very curious to see how it happens.
Last thing I wanted to mention is in the stake league, I got Alexis Diaz, and I also got Aroldis Chapman. I don't know what was going on earlier this week with Aroldis Chapman, but I don't want to talk about it. But at the end, I took Scott Barlow or Ryan Kerkering, and I wanted to mention too here Hector Neris because Craig Counsell seems a little reluctant to name Alzolay the closer. Are you reading anything into that, or is that kind of coach speak from Counsell, kind of just letting guys compete for roles?
No, I'm reading into it that this is exactly what I thought was going to happen, and this is why I wasn't drafting Adbert Alzolay, despite really liking him and thinking he was going to take over the job last year, and being able to get a cheap Adbert Alzolay on a few teams because of that. Craig Counsell is a modern manager. He doesn't, I don't think he's the sort who's going to care about strict hierarchies. He has in the past, but that's because look who was on his team. If you have Josh Hader, if you have Devin Williams, if you have guys who are that much better than everyone else, in your bullpen and they have, the political cachet to say, I want to be a closer, then, it might not be up to the manager. Maybe they are going to be the closer, but you put him in a new situation without anybody who has that, political cachet behind them, with anybody who can say, no, actually what I want goes. This is going to look exactly how Craig Counsell wants it to look. And he's the ultimate mix and matcher. He's, the guy who, before we shrunk September rosters down to 28 instead of 40, he would win every game in September because he would, use 15 different relievers for half an out each. And, that's Craig Counsell. So I really always thought that Craig Counsell was going to be approaching this situation as a tinkerer, as somebody who's going to put guys in different situations. I would not be running out and drafting Neris as a closer either. I think this is just going to be a situation where we might see 3 different guys with 8 to 15 saves.
Yeah, Neris has, just 5 saves over the last 2 years combined, but he did, exceed 20 in 2017 and 2019. He has closing experience. Not a guy I was, falling over myself to draft, but you never know. They did give him $9 million in the offseason. So Neris is one of those, potential closer darts that you can throw. Well, great stuff, Erik. Thanks so much for stepping in. Sorry that I had to eat into your New York time here, but
no
really
problem,
good stuff. Thanks for sharing your insight. Anything else on your mind
love
today?
To come on the show. No, just trying to figure out every National League player. I'm trying to figure out every single value in my head and memorize everything. So I'm as prepared as possible for Sunday morning. And good luck to your draft as well.
Yeah, maybe you think about James Wood.
Yeah.
Maybe check out his stat pages because I'm kind of interested. It sounds like I was reading his outlook. It sounds like James, not as high on James Wood, but maybe you get him and pair him with a guy like Eddie Rosario and see what happens. That's what I did.
I did end up stashing a Francisco Alvarez in NL out last year, despite going in planning to not do anything like that and just planning on drafting major leaguers. And I didn't end up having to stash him for very long. So I wouldn't rule out that I could end up with a prospect like Wood. We'll see.
Another guy that just got at the top of my mind that I'll mention here real quickly because I don't think we've said him. I don't think on our Friday show we've mentioned him at any point this spring. Emmanuel Valdez. Looks like he's going to be starting at second base for the Red Sox with Vaughn Grissom out. And actually, if you get a chance, look at Emmanuel Valdez because he has sneaky pop. 28 homers between, AA and AAA in 2022, and then 16 last year in just over 100 games. So he's not a big guy, but he actually – AL only, deep mixed league. If you're desperate for a middle, he might be passable early while he's seeing regular playing time. Just wanted to mention that.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Erik, and thank you to Fantrax and Rival Fantasy. We'll be back with you next week on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax.